You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
You're listening to the winning literary show, Off the Shelf Books Talk Radio, live with host Denise Turney, author of the books Long Walk Up, Portia, Love Pour Over Me, Spiral, Love Has Many Faces, and Rosetta's Great Hope. Turn up your dial and get ready for a blast of feature author interviews, 411 on book festivals, writing conferences, and so much more. Ready? Let's go.
I like to start the show, and this is our first show of 2025. So here's a quote we're going to start with, and it's from Susie Chasm. Doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. You're going to have to trust yourself. You're going to have to trust yourself and just trust that things will work out so you can go for it and don't talk yourself out of doing the things you want to do. Again, doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. And we learn a lot from failure, just like I learned a lot this morning. And this is from Susie Chasm. Susie Chasm. And I want to welcome you to, this is year 18. We're in our 18th year off the shelf. We started on live radio, and then now with that Rainbow Soul Jazz station, with Blog Talk Radio, and now we're on a different platform. So welcome to the Saturday, January 11th, 2025 show. We have an amazing author on deck for you. Excited to introduce you to her and listen to her talk about her books. But before we begin that, if you love short stories, you know, we all are so busy. There's just so much to do that sometimes we don't have time to really dig into a 400 page novel if you love a short story. And this one is about a woman who owns her own business, and she is go, go, go. I mean, she's a hard charger, but her family history and just the was something that's really real that people are dealing with. Burnout is a topic in this short story, and the title of it, and what she goes through. She has to learn more about herself, or she could go full-fledged into burnout. The title of it is Pieces of Me. Pieces of Me. You can get it on Apple Books. You can get it Amazon. Again, it's a short story. It's about 45 pages. I think you will love this. And depending on what's going on in your life, it might actually really speak to you directly. And I also would love for you to visit me online and sign up for my literary newsletter, The Book Lovers Heaven, at chistel.com. And that's www.chistel.com. And now let us go and meet our very special off-the-shelf guest. And this morning's guest is Karen Osborne. And I could tell you my first time connecting with her, she is patient, she is flexible, she is resilient, she is persistent, she is amazing. And Karen has been an avid lover of stories since she was a kid. She started writing when she was 12 years old. However, her career in academia and being a wife and mom, not to mention operating the Osborne Consulting and Training firm, saw writing take a backstage for her. She was traveling when she wrote the first draft of Getting It Right, and next came her books Tangled Lies, Reckonings, True Grace, and her new book Justice for Emerson, which is due out in March of this year. Please check Karen Osborne out online and her books at KarenOsborne.com, Karen, Karene. I hope she corrects me if I got this wrong. Osborne.com. Karene Osborne.com. And we're going to bring Karen on live. Welcome, welcome, Karen.
Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate being here. Yes, that funny little E in the middle. There's another Karen Osborne who writes. She writes fantasy and dystopian novels, and so my E in the middle is really important. Karen E. Osborne, and thank you for that.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that. We are just so honored to have you on here. The first few questions I'm going to ask you, I ask every guest on the show because our listeners like a little backstory on the guest. So, can you tell us, Karen, where you grew up and what life was like for you growing up?
So I grew up in the Bronx, New York, on a block where everybody on the block was second generation Americans. They're mostly from the Caribbean, and everybody was your mother and everybody was your father, no matter what you were doing on the sidewalk and on the street. Walking to school, we just did everything together, and I'm still friends with so many of those folks. A zillion years ago. We were pretty much working class. Everybody on the block was, they worked for the police or they worked for, transit. This is in in Bronx, in New York. So they were on the subway. They were mailmen and firemen, and the moms pretty much stayed home because I'm pretty darn old. So the moms all stayed home and were housewives, and so on one level it was a very idyllic um, upbringing. But unfortunately, on the other side, I am a survivor, more than a survivor. I was a victim and then a survivor, and now I am a thriver, incest survivor.
Oh, bless you.
So, yeah, so it was a complex growing up, and when you read my novels, you'll see, a lot of my protagonists had trauma in their lives. You write what you know.
Okay. Are you an only child?
No, I have an older brother and a younger brother, and unfortunately, we were all victims.
Oh, bless you. Bless you. Um, as a child, what did you want to be when you grew up? What did you dream of being when you grew up?
I was going to be a writer. I
Wow.
knew it from a little girl. Reading was a great escape. My father, who was the perpetrator, but also gave me lots of gifts. People are not 100% evil in my experience. And so he had evil in him, but he also gave me the love of reading and the love of writing. So I devoured books as a little girl. It was also a great escape. It was a way not to think about what's going on in your life, just go off someplace. And I would just make up stories all the time. So I always wanted to do it. I didn't get published till I was 69 years old, but it's
Look at
never
you though,
too
but you
late.
did it. There you go. There
It's
you go.
never too late.
There you go. I love your spirit, man. You gotta know. I'm not quitting spirit. Tell us about the time you wrote book reports on stories you made up in your head. And did your teachers ever catch on to what you were doing?
So because I loved making up stories, and I still do love making up stories. So and I did read a lot. It wasn't like I was trying to dodge reading, but I liked my stories. So I would write the book. I'd come up with characters. I'd come up with a plot. I didn't write the story. I would just have all the pieces in my head, and the characters would talk to me in my head. And so I would write up my book report. I knew that you were supposed to have an ISBN number, and I knew from the library, what's supposed to be the information that every book has, the year it was published and who the publisher was. So it was great fun. And no, I never got caught. The
Oh
teachers
my,
were always intrigued, like, oh, I haven't heard of this book. I haven't heard of this author. Well, Karen, this sounds so interesting. Thank you for sharing this with us.
oh my goodness. I have never even heard of anybody who Wow, what a imagination. I never even heard of anybody who's done it. And you're one of the few guests. I've 18 years on doing off the shelf. One of the few who knew as a kid they were a writer. Most it fell into it. They didn't. They just kind of stumbled into it. That shared. What role did you feel while you were working in academia? Were you a professor?
So I was in charge of fundraising. So
Okay.
we were, which is, schools and universities require an awful lot of money to keep going, and tuition doesn't cover it. That's one of the reasons tuition keeps going up, up, and up. And I didn't work for one of those big, rich universities that had huge endowments. I worked for scrappy institutions that fundraising was really important. So I was responsible for bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars.
Mm.
I'm not talking about, events and, you know, little kinds of gifts. I'm talking about working the high end of the pyramid, and it was exciting. I traveled the world. It was a wonderful career, um, and it got me. Then I had one president too many. On my ninth president of a university, that I stomped out and called my husband and said, "I'm quitting my job right now."
Oh.
And he said, "Whoa, baby, wait, wait, wait. Can we talk about it?" And I said, "No, no, I'm leaving." So he's my wind between from under my
Oh.
wings. So he said, "Well, then why don't we start a business together?" So that's
Wow.
what we did.
Oh my God. Let me ask you. Um, the fundraising you did for college universities. How has that helped you for our listeners who are authors themselves, or maybe even they own a business? How has that helped you with going out and marketing, promoting your books to more book buyers, or trying to get your books in, whether it would be schools, gift shops? How has that helped you?
It was, Denise, I was so blessed. So when my first book came out, I was still working full time. And a good part of my business was training other people. So I was a motivational speaker and a trainer. And I, people would invite me and pay me to come and spend the day and teach their fundraisers and teach their board members and teach their CEOs. And so when Getting It Right came out, I'd say, "Oh, and I have this book." And I was wondering at the end of the talk, at the end of the workshop, could I just like have a little table and offer my books? And everybody was, "Oh, Karen, of course. Oh my gosh, you've got a book. Yes." And so the first book, I sold it mostly at workshops. When I
Wow.
finished talking, I my little table would be set up. One school even lent me two assistants, and so one person took the money, and the other person handed me the book, and all I had to do was smile and sign.
Oh gosh.
But since I've stopped working full time as a speaker, and uh, at this point in my life, I don't do it. I take a gig every once in a while. It's actually been harder to sell the books because I don't have that natural audience.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh
But
well.
it was very helpful. People were amazing and helpful. And the other thing I would just say about selling your books is you have to just people say writers say, "Oh, I hate marketing. I hate marketing." Well, if you hate marketing, then you're just never going to make it.
Right. You got to
It's
get
just
out there. You got
got
to
to do it.
introduce people to your books. There's so many books published now. They're not just going to find your book. You have to get out here and introduce people to it. You mentioned getting it right. So we want to talk about several of your books here today, including your latest. So can you to just start off with your first? Can you give us a brief overview of your first novel, Getting It Right?
Yeah, so Kara and Alex are half sisters that have never met each other. They're only 6 months apart and they didn't know that each other existed. And Alex grew up in dysfunctional privilege. She's white, her product of a white father and a white mother, and she has two siblings. And Kara who is mixed race and has the same, shares the father, the white father, grew up in foster care. Her mother died at a very young age. Her grandmother was quite old. She'd had her mother late in life. And so she died, and Kara was put into the system. There was nobody else, to take care of her. And all the time that she was in the system, a lot of abuse happened and bad things happened to her. She was just praying every day that her father, whoever he was, would come and find her. And so the story opens on the eve of the death of their shared father. And he'd had a massive heart attack. And he calls Alex to his bedside and says, I need you to find this child that I abandoned so I can make things right before I die. And so the story takes place over 2 weeks in March, when Alex tries to find Kara. And of course, there's lots going on. There's all kinds of insider trading and FBI and lots of action, short chapters, fast moving. But that's the basic premise.
Oh my God. So, okay. Who's in the financial services? Alex? You said
Alex,
insider trading and all this stuff. So I'm thinking one of them works for a bank or something.
no, it's Kara that falls for the wrong guys.
Oh my gosh.
When you haven't grown up with good examples of what
Oh,
relationships look like. So she's got this guy, and he's the one in financial services that gets her
oh.
caught up in a mess. A mess. Kara's struggling. Kara's struggling. But so was Alex. Alex grew up with all this privilege, but her mother's crazy, and her father is clearly not a terrific person. So she has a lot of
How
a lot of
how old are they? How old are they at the start of the
30.
story? Oh, they're in their 30s. Okay.
They're
Did
30 years old, both of them. They're 6 months apart.
so
Wasn't he a nice guy?
yeah. Oh my God.
Both his women were pregnant at the same time.
But what describe him as was he a successful businessman
Yeah,
or
yeah.
okay?
His name is Worth Lawrence, and his mother-in-law used to call him Worthless Worth,
No.
but he was wealthy. Lives in the suburbs of New York, Bedford, New York. Um, he owned horses. Just living the high life.
Mm,
Had his own company. He worked for mostly hedge funds
ah,
people, and yeah, so he was all in the world of finance as well.
interesting. Hopefully, maybe you link those two together with Kara's boyfriend and her dad, which would be just a real good thriller. Introduce we so that for our off the shelf listeners, getting it right. Look at that title. Look at that title. It's like it starts off maybe on a totally wrong, but do these sisters come to form a friendship? Because it's not their fault what has happened.
It's
Now,
not, but Kara's pretty damaged, and Alex kind of thinks that Kara should be grateful when Alex finds her, and Kara's not feeling it. So,
mm,
there's a lot of dynamics. What does it mean to be family? What does it mean, overcoming trauma? Um, it's got a lot of layers.
mm. I'm going to ask you about another previous book, then we're going to talk about your latest, and I'm going to try to cover each of your books. But can you introduce us to Vera Moon and Tangled Lies?
Yes. So Vera is a 70-year-old African American woman who comes home on the first 2 pages of the book to find her adult son brutally murdered.
Oh, oh my God.
And 3 months later, she is in a car crash that Danny, who is our second protagonist, who's 25 and white and a hot mess, and homeless and a pathological liar, but she has a good heart. And Danny sees the car crash, and she just feels like something was wrong. It didn't look like an accident to her. So over 2 weeks in May, you'll know there's a theme here with my books. Over 2 weeks in May, they come together, a very unlikely pair, this 70-year-old Black woman and this 25-year-old hot mess female, and both of them looking for things in their life that are missing, and they solve the murder together.
Oh, wow.
And there's tons
Oh,
of danger and bad guys and sleuths, and again, the short chapters, fast moving, and one trouble after another that the two women have to face, including, and I always put a little romance in all my books. So Danny has a really sweet boyfriend who's dropped her because of all her lies and bad behavior. So we're rooting for them too. We want them to find each other.
okay. I love the book's cover. What was it like working with the cover illustrator?
So Getting It Right was one publisher, and then Tangled Lies was my new publisher, and both of them said, "Oh, we'll send you 3 choices, and you pick the one you like." That didn't really happen that way. So, but Getting It Right, I loved the cover. I thought it was really great, and I just said thank you. And Tangled Lies, I didn't love the cover,
Mm,
but I didn't know that I had a voice that could push back. So when the third book came out, I was able to push back and have more of a say in the cover of Reckonings, as I did with the next 3 books. I just didn't know, because it was the first time I was working with that publisher, and I was just so grateful. And I
mm,
just didn't know that I could speak up and say, can we do something different?
mm.
Uh, so it's fun working with designers, and I sent in ideas and I sent in descriptions of what I kind of had in mind, and then the publisher, worked on it and came up with beautiful covers
Oh,
after Tangled Lies. It's not that Tangled Lies is a terrible cover; it's just not as beautiful as the next 2
not one of
and
your
3.
favorites.
Next 3.
So I said we was going to talk about the latest one next, but before that, I do want to talk about Reckonings. Reckonings, True Grace, and then the one that's coming out in March. So, for Reckonings, can you get off the shelf listeners a brief synopsis of Reckonings?
So, yes. So this is a 36-year-old woman, Roxy, who, African American woman, who feels old at 36. She
Wow.
lives with her 4 children, 2 rescue dogs, her husband in a teeny tiny apartment, and she's working at a job she hates, and she's tired. She's just worn out. And she thinks, though, that she has an answer and a solution. All she really wants is a bigger place for her family. And her oldest daughter is pregnant. She's 17 years old and pregnant, and she won't tell her parents who the father is. And so Roxy is just like, but she's written a play, and the local community theater has agreed to stage it in 9 days. And
Mm.
when the story starts, it's 9 days away. They agreed a long time ago. But when the story opens, the play opens in 9 days. And Roxy is also keeping a secret. When
Oh,
she was 18, when she was 17, she was raped by this guy named Spider. And she never told Carl, her husband, who was her boyfriend at the time. She never told Jewel, who is her oldest daughter, who's pregnant herself. And now Spider is back in town. So the play is in 9 days. She thinks it's going to save everything. It's called The Monday Night Murder. And Spider is back in town. He's wealthy, he's successful, and he's come back to save the town, because the town is, struggling financially and stuff. So he's come in like a white knight,
oh Lord.
that's going to save the town. And now he's threatened Roxy that he's going to tell Jewel that he believes that Jewel is his child.
Oh my gosh.
And he, in his mind, it was consensual sex.
Oh my goodness.
So it's like, again, short chapters, fast pace, toxic secrets. Poor Roxy.
Oh my God. You have a lot going on in these characters' lives. Tell us about Roxy's marriage Is it a sweet, rewarding marriage? Are they team? Are they like partners? They work together well.
So they work together and they've loved each other since high school. But Carl is also tired. The two of them work for his father, and he hates his job and he feels trapped and he feels like he's getting old, too soon also. And when Spider comes back in town, he renews his friendship because they all knew each other in high school. So he renews his friendship with Carl, and so that's even more frightening for Roxy because Carl doesn't know. And she said she's going to find, she has a best friend named Dallas. Dallas is such a cool character. And she has this really, really great friend who says, you've just got to tell him you're digging a hole. Stop digging. And she's, I will, I just have to find the right time. And then there's the actress who's going to be in it is also a childhood friend who's agreed to star in her play just for 1 week. And she has all kinds of drama going. So it's a lot, all in 9 days.
Oh my God! How many main characters? We've got her husband. We've Carl Spider. We've got Roxy, her friend, and there's another woman. So you got what, five or
Yeah, about
okay?
5. Yeah.
It is she? So let's talk. I'm looking at her as a mother. Her daughter's 17, and she's pregnant. Some mothers, especially a single mother, they really do everything and they can to keep their daughter from going down the same path they went down. Is she a devoted mother and wife? And then doing my research for the show, and does she give in to temptation at any point in this story? You don't have to give the details away, but
Yeah, she is a devoted mother, but she's very torn. Jewel wants to put the baby up for adoption, and she's Roxy's very torn about that. Roxy's mother abandoned Roxy when Roxy was 12. And so one part of her is saying, we can't raise another baby. Jewel hasn't even graduated from high school. And so Carl and I are going to have to raise this child. So, okay, so adoption's the right thing. But then the other part of her remembers how she felt. Didn't you love me enough to keep me? Didn't you love me enough to stay? So she's very torn. And she and Jewel have a very interesting relationship. You see the love, but you see the conflict
mm,
between the two of them. All of my characters are very, multi-layered. And in fact, most if I look at reviews of all my books, one of the things that's consistent is how fully developed the characters are, how real they are. And that's because they are, Denise. I mean, as a writer, you know that, right?
that you know what, that is a great compliment because people say that one of the number one things that attract readers to a story and keep their interest is the characters. Even if you have a lot going on in a story, if it's an action story or a mystery or whatever, a romance. If the reader doesn't really care about the characters, they're not going to stick with it. Particularly if it's a book series, they're not going to stick with the story because they don't feel a connection to the character. So that's a great compliment on the reviews that you've received from readers. Why did you choose the title Reckonings?
Because there's so many reckonings that have to happen. There's the reckoning of the lie that she kept for 18 years, that Roxy kept from her husband for 18 years. They're supposed to be partners and trust each other, and here she's carrying a lie. There's coming reckonings with her daughter Jewel. Does Jewel find out that Spiders could have been her father? Is Roxy doesn't really know, and so there's a reckoning there. There's also the reckoning of Spider. He doesn't think he did anything wrong. He says, revisit, you're revising history. That's not the way I remember it. Uh, and but rape is rape,
Yeah.
and but he just feels like he literally said to her when he was finished, he said, "You'll like it better next time."
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a
Wow.
lot of reckonings that have to happen. That's why it's a S on there as opposed to just reckoning. Lots
Okay.
of reckonings have to happen.
Okay. Reckonings, you guys, by Karen Osborne.
Karen E. Osborne.
Karen E. Osborne. When and where is the story True Grace set, and why did you choose this time period and setting?
So this one, oh my goodness, I love the cover of this one too. True Grace is inspired by my grandmother,
Mm,
and it's set in 1924, 100 years, years ago.
yes. Oh my
And
goodness.
so many of the issues of the 24, the 1924 are so similar to today's time. So Grace is 27 years old when you meet her. She has 5 children. She was born in the Congo. She was educated in England. She got married in Jamaica, and now they're in Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance. This is the Roaring Twenties, and she's living a comfortable life, and she's made peace with her life, even though her marriage is not happy. She's truly made peace with her life, and all she wants to do is raise her children and give them more opportunities than she had. And so when the story opens, um, she comes home unexpectedly and is met by something so devastating. I'm very, very proud of this, the way I wrote this chapter. It's not for the faint of heart, but she comes
Mm,
home and finds something so, so devastating. And so the story is how an uneducated woman, she's self educated, but she didn't graduate even from high school. She got
mhm,
married very young. So, how this mixed race woman, this immigrant, in a time when immigrants were mistreated, a time when women weren't believed, a time when, even though the Roaring Twenties was all women taking off their girdles and their bras, that was young, white, affluent women. That whole flapper thing,
mhm,
it didn't reach the Harlem housewife. It
mhm,
didn't reach the Jewish housewife in the suburbs. It didn't reach, it
mhm,
was, and so, but all that's going around her, but
mhm,
she can't. It's not part of her. So over this one is the only book that's more than 2 weeks because it's historical fiction. So but it's only 6 months. Over 6 months, it is how she overcomes. And she's an extraordinary woman. And my grandmother was an extraordinary, extraordinary
oh,
woman. So it's got lots of truth in it, like the opening scene, but I had to make up a lot. But I
mhm,
was blessed with, I have 5 books that were written about her father. He was famous in his time. And I have 300 handwritten letters um, from Grace. So, and the conversations I had with her while I was a teenager. So I had a lot of good source material, but I still have
mhm.
to make up a lot. It's a powerful, powerful story.
Wow. I was going to ask you if Grace was based on a real life person, and yes, that you got the answer. It was based in part on your grandmother. So she said she didn't. This Grace didn't graduate from high school. She's an immigrant. What? How else would you describe her? Is she like bold? Is she timid? Is she? Is she? And she has a family of her own now in the United States. We're in Harlem. Is that correct? Is she
Hmm.
married? Is she is what? How would you describe her personality? This is in the 1920s when women were held back here. Uh, but it does she take risk? Does she stay within what people say this is how you should behave, or does she bust out? What like a Mary McLeod Bethune or a Harriet Tubman or how would you describe Grace in the book in the novel? How would you describe her?
Grit and grace. She used to say she had a mantra, and so does Grace in the book. I am the daughter of a British explorer and a strong African woman who fought the Congo, who built schools and dug wells and helped people and dodged poison darts. I am the daughter of these two incredible people, and so I can overcome.
Mhm.
And she used to say to me that she got her grit from her African mother and she got her grace from her English father. And the two things together carries her through. So she has to dig deep. And every turn, she's not sure what to do. She doesn't know what to do, but she just knows that she has to take care of her children and she has to protect her children. And she makes some tough, tough decisions as she goes along. So when I speak at book clubs, one of the questions that I ask them is, would you have made some of the same decisions? Do you think you would have made some of the same decisions that Grace made? And what options do you think she had? And did she not take advantage of all her options? And what if this happened later and not 1924? So we have rich, rich conversations about Grace's choices, but she is so determined that she is going to do everything in her power, which is limited
Mm,
power. The police, everybody, the social welfare system, everything is against her.
wow. Who's
And
pulling?
like
No,
I
go ahead.
always do, there's a
Uh-huh.
lovely little a love story in there too.
Awesome. Who's pull? So I was going to ask you, who's pulling for her? Because is she living in America by herself? Who's pulling for her in this story? And if you could introduce us to that person.
So she has a best friend named Beryl, and Beryl is married to a very nice man, patient man. And Beryl is, but again, they're limited in their abilities. Beryl is also an immigrant, but Beryl sticks by Grace and really helps her. She's from Jamaica, and then Grace gets a job with a Jewish woman, Dahlia, and you have to decide for yourself if they're friends or not.
Mm.
And then this wonderful man, Jonathan, one reader wrote me on Facebook, and she said, "I want a Jonathan. How do I get to
Oh,
meet a Jonathan?"
okay, Jonathan.
So she has a really sweet, sweet guy who's pursuing her and who she's running from.
Mm.
But she has secrets too. Secrets and lies. So
Okay.
yeah.
What have readers been saying about True Grace?
Oh, I get wonderful, wonderful reviews. If you go on Amazon, you'll
Awesome.
read some amazing reviews. Here's one. A powerful story about love, courage, sacrifice, resilience, and hope.
Oh
True
wow.
Grace by Karen Osborne will hold you captive from its tragic and uplifting journey of true grace. A compelling and suspenseful historical family drama about a woman with intelligence, courage, heart, and of course, grace.
Awesome. Oh my goodness. And don't gotta love when you get and you learn so much from reviews, what to change with the next book and what to keep going. That is awesome. Now I know Justice for Emerson is not due out for a couple of months, but could you introduce us to that book, Justice for Emerson, and just give us a brief overview of Justice for Emerson?
I had so much fun writing this book, Denise. This book, I decided I was tired of trauma. I wanted to turn away from writing about trauma, and so why not write about murder again, right? So Aria is 50 years old. She's a young black woman. She has a 18-year-old son who's in college, and she runs a not-for-profit. She's a really good person. This not-for-profit helps people the unhoused and hungry, and she has after-school programs and free showers, and she gives free clothes and food, and so she's running this not-for-profit, but it is in a lot of trouble. And she doesn't know why. She's not understanding why the money is just draining away. And she also doesn't know why her son has not been in touch with her when he usually calls her like several times a week. So she's worried about her son. She's worried about the not-for-profit. She's worried that this guy has fallen for her, but she's only a 5'2",
Mhm.
and she wears 3-inch heels, and she has sort of a chip on her shoulder about being little. And this guy that's interested in her, and she says she's a brown-skinned black woman, and this man that's interested in her is 6'2".
Whoa.
And she says he's too tall. Like, she asks her friend, how do they even make love? Does he have to lift people up? Like, she can't. And then, so he's too tall. He's too rich because he's a donor to her not for profit. And so, what would people say? He's too young. She's 50 and he's 40, and maybe he wants to have more children, or, like, my factory is closed.
Yeah.
And and then he's also too white. This is the first white man she's ever had anything to do with, on a romantic level. And finally, it's too soon. Her husband Ben has only been dead for 2 years. So that's all happens on page one, that we find out all this stuff. And then she discovers the murder of one of her volunteers, one of her sweet, wonderful volunteers. He's 77 years old. He's a Vietnam vet, and he's murdered in the basement of her
Oh,
not-for-profit.
wow.
And the murderer is still there when she finds him, and he runs up the stairs, and he, and she fights him back, and he runs out. So all this happens like in the first few pages. So so over 2 weeks in, what month is it? I can't remember what month this is this time. But anyway, there's over 2 months. I think it's March again, or April. They're trying to, she and Jax is the two everything boyfriend, are trying to solve the murder along with the local police. And there's all kinds of intrigue there. But we meet Emerson, who's the murdered Vietnam vet. It's a dual timeline story. And so we
Mm.
meet him when he's 20 in 1968. And we follow his life until he
Mm.
ends up murdered in present day. So it's sort of historical fiction, the whole part of Emerson's life and what happened to Vietnam vets when they came back, and how Blackman
Mm.
felt. He was on his way to Vietnam on the day that Martin Luther King was murdered.
Oh my gosh.
And it makes you, it just made the black men on their way thinking, like, why, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Why? And then just a few months later, Bobby Kennedy is murdered.
Yeah.
And so these young brothers in Vietnam are questioning their loyalty, and questioning. And then, so they were treated so badly when they came
Hmm.
back. And like when you read how Women by Kristen Hanna, how women were treated, the combat nurses, how they were treated when they came back. So Emerson had to overcome a lot. He
Hmm.
was working hard on being the best person he can be, but he stumbled and stumbled and stumbled, and so there's addiction,
Mm.
alcoholism, and then how did he become this sweet, wonderful volunteer, and then why did he get
Yeah.
murdered?
Yeah. A mystery. You like mysteries. I can tell.
I
There's
did.
a bit of a mystery in each of your stories. Now we touched, as we start to come to the close of today's show. We touched on this a little bit earlier when we were talking about your fundraising that you did for academia. But I always like to ask this question for our off the shelf listeners who themselves may be book lovers and also authors. Can you share 3 to 4 steps that you personally have found to be effective at getting the word out about your books?
So I have a podcast like you do. But it's a weekly video podcast,
Hmm.
and I do it to really help and lift other authors.
Okay.
But while I'm interviewing people, I sometimes mention my books. So that's one way that I'm out there every single week. I'm 4 years old. And then and then I post that on my website, which brings people to the website. And I have a YouTube channel, and
Hmm.
I try and keep my website active and interesting. And, um, and then, I lean on friends, my dear friends,
Okay.
who invite me and host me, and do that. And then I think there's really something to be said about ads. You
Yeah.
have to invest money. And if you don't invest money, it's,
Yeah, it's tough.
it's tough.
You gotta get the public things. I found attending public speaking events, book festivals, and if not book festivals, I used to go to a lot of African American festivals. Any place where people who would read my books were, and I just stand up at that table and not sit down. And I'd get new people to subscribe to my newsletter while I was there. I'd hand them out free excerpts from my books, bookmarks, everything to with my website URL on it. I found that to also be helpful. And again, like you said, ads. Now, before we talk about where people can get copies of your books, can you tell what advice, Karen, would you have for someone who's looking to write and publish a book based on your experience, uh, just to help to hopefully prevent them from a painful experience? What advice would you have for somebody who would really, let's say in 2025, I'm going to write and publish a book? What tips could you share with them?
The first one is writers write. You have to write. You can't keep talking about writing. You can't keep saying that I have a novel in the works. You have to write. You need to finish something like only 5% or 6% of the people who start books ever finish them. So that's the first thing. Write, even if it's 15 minutes a day. That's what my son, who's also a writer, he just vows that 15 minutes a day, he'll at least write that every day. The second one is that you've got to learn your craft. I spent so much time taking workshops and, just trying to be better, reading to learn. Other people's novels teach you so much, what to do, what not to do. So writers write, writers read, so you can work on your craft. And then the last thing I would say, I do have a blog post called 13 Tips for Getting Started that you can find on my website. But just to keep it short, the third one that I would say is don't give up. You're never too old. You're never too young. You're never too anything. And don't give up. Be tenacious. Be tenacious.
Okay. Where can off the shelf listeners get a copy of your books?
So I'm on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, BookBub, Goodreads, and so you can get any place that you buy your books or borrow your books. Even if it's not on the shelf, you just have to ask them, and they can order it for you. And then you can find me and more information about my books and my videos and where I'm going to be speaking at www.KarenE.Osborne, Osborne. There's no U in Osborne. KarenEOsborne.com.
Oh, what a pleasure. We have just been blessed to connect with Karen E. Osborne. Again, please visit her online at her website, www.kareneosborne.com. What a pleasure. And look for her new book, Justice for Emerson, which is scheduled to be released in March in 2025. Other titles by Karen E. Osborne are Getting It Right, Tangled Lies, Reckonings, and True Grace. And again, Justice for Emerson, due out March of this year. Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Karen.
Thank
I appreciate
you.
having you here on the show. And once it finishes streaming and I'm finished editing it, I will send you a link to the show. Wish you the best with your writing career. And thank you so much again. And to our off the shelf listeners, as I always tell you, you are amazing. You are just absolutely incredible. Go out and create a fabulous day for yourself. I'll see you back here next Saturday at 11 a.m. We will not be live as we were before, but on Saturdays I'll have a show posted either Saturday or soon after. It'll be out and available, and I'll be marketing and promoting the show. Again, go create a fabulous day for yourself. See you back here next week. Bye for now.
Bye.